Now, I open up the space for questions. Please, Alexander, go ahead.
Your Excellency, I have one or maybe...
Mask.
Okay. Yes, Excellency, I have one or maybe two packed together questions about what are, in your opinion, virtues and obligations of Christian politicians and economists in confrontation with pandemic?
Yes. As you know, it is very hard in the political world not to use the common language. The common language, which is also determined by media and so on. What we have tried to do through the social doctrine of the Church is to have a rational approach to the values that we defend. When we speak of the human person and its freedom, this is absolutely accessible to anybody who uses his reason. Now, I do not think that Christian politicians have a different language on combating the pandemic. And it would also be strange. Combating the pandemic must be done in a way that everybody can reach and understand. What we face very often is that in our sphere, I mean in our Catholic sphere, we have certain persons who do not accept vaccination. Why? And there is no rational reason. That means they reject our technological society, they reject the interference of the state in what they consider as their intimate personhood. And you cannot convince these people because they are under an ideology. And this ideology is often shared by, let us say, those Christians who are more traditionalists. Okay. This is our experience, and we have it, I think, everywhere in Europe. I think that the obligation of Christian politicians are to combat this pandemic and to convince the people to resort to vaccination. It is all a question of being aware that each one has to take its own life into consideration and to decide. And I think on this point, what a Christian politician would say would not differ very much from what would say another person.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. Now, the question from Professor Grodzicki.
Thank you. Your Excellency, thank you for your presentation of the European project. I would just add that this project in practice has been narrowed down to the European single market, while the social pillar, so vital, was left to the member states and to the race to the bottom competition. Some of our communities are more resilient, while others more vulnerable. And I agree with you, it's high time to expand the responsibility of European Union, but I'm eager to hear more from you. What are, in your view, the specific social areas or even concrete activities into which European Union should engage, especially in the context of pandemic? Thank you.
Yes. You know, the European treaties say clearly where lie the competences of the Union. And one of the competences of the Union is also economic regulation, which goes beyond the sphere of national economies. And this is now challenged in many European countries by rather populistic propaganda, I do not think it is a good thing, because this is unrealistic. We cannot imagine that Europe would become again a continent with its civilization, its tradition, its history, and not being able to take place in the concert of superpowers. We have superpowers, we have new superpowers coming out, but Europe being divided, the European nation would not be able to develop any future. Being together and putting together what we cannot deal by ourselves. This is the future, where more cooperation. As for economic cooperation, it is obvious, even if you do not want the market is here to say that we need to do things together. Market should be regulated, and not being a power in itself, which is under the interest of a few people or corporations. But we have to put together what is needed to survive as nations and as a continent.
Thank you, Your Excellency. A question from me. In his latest encyclical, Pope Francis has criticized the present dominant economic paradigm, that is the neoliberalism, and shows how this discrepancy between the promise of neoliberalism and the outcomes shattered trust in the end. And what Pope Francis speaks of and shows as a solution are the concepts of fraternity, solidarity, social friendship. But now the puzzling question is how this idea of a fraternal economy is translated into real socioeconomic terms, policies, tools. So the question is it about a kind of institutional support for deconcentration of monopolies, capital, more of the commons, the publics, cooperative economy maybe? Is it the kind of structural reforms that flow from Pope Francis's teaching?
Yes. When you speak of fraternal economy, that means a conversion of your mind. You cannot impose fraternity through compulsory institutions. If our mind has been changed, then we can construct something together and do it in a fraternal way. That means that the economy, producing, consuming, and so on, has its own logic. But we can deal with it differently if we are animated by a spirit of putting the human person at the center, of looking after the well-being of the persons, which are not only materialistic, but also spiritual well-beings. If we do that, then we reach what the Holy Father is wishing. When he speaks, it is obvious that fraternity has to deal with all the aspects of human life, all the aspects of human relations, between states, between economy, between corporations, and so on. But having fraternity at the heart of our endeavor, that means that we must convince the people on the grassroots, the people in charge of government, the people who take decisions. And this is really what I would hope for Europe, to be able not to follow the mainstream globalized world without discussing of what is at stake. What is at stake is the survival of the human person as such, its dignity, its spirit, and the way we do things. And this, for me, the main threat for our time is the negation, the rejection of the very idea of the spirit. we speak of the mind. They speak of the mind, saying the mind is a produce of your brain. Okay, this is all materialistic. But if you negate the fact that human persons have the status of spiritual beings, which makes us different from the rest of the animal world, this is the very point on which we can build an economy which is not only following the blind laws of the market, but an economy which puts in front of it goals to be achieved, which include the development of all persons and what is necessary for the happiness, because this is at stake, of all persons in our society.
Right. Thank you, Your Excellency.
I want to say.
Yeah, right. So Monsignor Sorondo, and after this remark, we will close and move to the next speaker.
I don't know if His Excellency know this new book of Joseph Ratzinger with the introduction of Pope Francis, because I think as theologian is Pope Ratzinger is again go more deeply that the same John Paul II in criticize and say, for example, in the introduction that
could you just move closer to the microphone? Thank you.
In the introduction that he's writing recently, say that the matrimony, homosexual matrimony, is against to God Creator, and this is against to the fundamentals of the European countries, and also the theory of the gender is against to Deus Creator. So, and because they go against to God, and God is the fundament of the European believers, and also is the fundament of the human person and the human rights. And so it's very, very deeply in his critique, and in the end say it's demoniac, these things. So I think that that we need to take in consideration, and it's also introduced by Pope Francis that say it's just the things that say Pope Benedict. So look, this is the magisterium of the popes, and it's the continuity of the magisterium of John Paul II. We need to say these things.
Thank you, Monsignor. I think this, since we moved from COVID and we moved from European economy a lot, I think this will spark probably a big discussion during the panel itself.